he's on this elk hunt. It's the last day. And they get up there and they get on this bull, lets it go, and the elk runs off, right?
Yeah.
So they come back the next morning. Pat Reeves says, found him. And Stan's like, yes. Stan looks down there and he says, my fletching is sticking out the butthole of that elk this far. He said, I perfectly 10-ringed her in the brown eye.
Welcome back to another edition of the Drury Outdoors 100% Wild podcast. I'm your host, Matt Drury. This episode, we are Timless. Tim Chelsvik, my co-host, he's tied up. He's waving at me in his office. Poor guy, we just won't let him out of all these meetings. But I have a special in-studio guest. I have Mr. Mark Beck, a cast member of Critical Mass on the Outdoor Channel, one of the Drury Outdoors shows, and a Drury Outdoors team member. What's up, Mark?
Hey, man, Matt, thanks for being here. Came down, did my in-studio interviews, and you kind of coerced me to do this, so here I am. That's
right. So I hate not having Tim. Tim always brings a great energy to the show and always interesting theories and comments, but I had you in here. I figured we had to do the podcast.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
That's right. So this is kind of a special edition episode. So I want to kind of dive into a few. It's going to be a BS episode. First and foremost,
I'm a major in that. So.
That is same. Right. So, but what I wanted to dive into first a little bit is your history, because Mark and Terry, you've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, through Stan, probably Potts, and then I actually showed Mark and Terry some farms back in the day. I did real estate for a long time, and I'll never forget. I showed them a farm on Seven Sisters Road. And they were wanting to know where the Seven Sisters were. So
sounds about right.
Yeah, it was fun. I remember that. It was funny. But yeah, I've been kind of off and on and through Stan, and kind of got to know you guys through that. So that's been almost probably 20 years ago. Yeah,
I remember when Mark, he reached out to Terry and I in a text group. He said, hey, I've been talking to Mark Beck. I think he's all about jumping on board with the team and jumping into Critical Mass. He's filming his hunts. They're killing big deer. So what do you guys think? And of course I was like, yeah, sure. Why not?
Yeah. Tom Ware's been a great friend of mine. We play golf league together, and, so he's been doing it a long time. And I was on some other shows over the years, and so it just was a natural fit. Once that ended, I thought I still wanted to do it. I almost won't go to the tree without a camera. Not that because I want it on TV, just because it's part of the challenge for me is that I just love filming it now. It's just part of who I am.
You're doing a lot of self-filming. So what I always find interesting about watching your hunts is during the rut, it seems like you're always, you're in the middle of your timber somewhere in Illinois and you're self-filming, which makes it extremely difficult to a timber hunt. It's one thing to self-film. You're in a box blind and, a field setup, food plot setup, but doing it in the timber in the rut, I always am amazed by that element of it. How hard is that?
It's hard. It's harder than you think it is. I mean, you know how the rut is. The deer are never here for very long, right? So, part of it's out of necessity, just because, all my buddies that want to film or want to hunt too, right? So yeah. It's hard to, and I don't have a dedicated camera person. My son Cooper's great. I mean, Rhett's great, but I want those guys to hunt too. So I was like, hell, I'll just go do it myself. And I've had pretty good luck at it. I've obviously had opportunities that if I had a cameraman, I would have, maybe gotten another deer or two killed. But
yeah.
One in particular, a couple of years ago, the Pulsey buck, we called him, and he was probably in the low 180s. And had I had a cameraman, I would have killed him. But during the whole show, I was going to say something else, but
you can on this podcast. I guess
at the whole shit show, my bow, my release caught my vinyl harness, plink, 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 and it was in November. Deer was going back and forth, but he was dead. I had a cameraman, but hey, that's the way it is. Story's more fun now. They didn't kill him, really.
Did you guys ever kill him?
Nope.
Ever? Is he still alive?
We didn't see him this year.
Yeah.
Somebody says, I think that might have been the Pulsey buck, but no confirmed sightings or pictures. So
I think that's even just in filming in general, that element of it. And we always say it, we've said it for a long time. The camera saved another life.
For sure. I mean,
amazing how often that happens. Yeah. But I've also had team members that are like, I had to shoot. There's two phrases. A camera saved another life, or I had to shoot him. That's what we hear a lot.
Because they didn't get on film because they had to shoot him.
Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
I won't do that though. I've just told myself I don't probably now if a 250 walked out there, I'm not sure what I'd do.
That's right.
But even if it's 170, 80-inch deer, if I don't have it on film, I'm not going to shoot it.
Yeah.
I just, that's just what I've decided to do. Everybody each their own, right? But I just done it long enough now. I think, to me, it's a challenge of getting it on camera.
Yeah. What's the most memorable, looking back, thinking back all your hunts, not just with us, but in general, like, is there one that stands out, a memorable hunt, a big deer, your kids with you, whatever it is?
Well, the most memorable, the deer was found dead. I never killed him, but he was 264 and I had him at 40 yards and 20 yards and didn't get a shot.
264?
264, yeah.
You had him at how far?
20 yards, but he was in a standing corn. Had the farmer not been lazy and had harvested the corn, because it was only like
farmer's fault.
It was only like, literally it was November and there's no reason why the corn was still there. And the corn strip was only a little wider than this building, 30 yard wide strip. And he comes down, I see these does in the corn and I see there's a buck in there and the deer was called Big Louie, and we named him that. John Severson, who's was
with Rage for a long time.
Faradine, ran Faradine, right? He named him Big Louie, and the deer walks through this corn, and they pop out about 50 yards, and Big Louie walked right underneath me 20 yards, and I just couldn't see what it was. Then he pops up out there and I got this hedge tree I can't shoot through, and he finally gets out there at 60 yards, and they get my wind and he runs off. And I had another stand 80 yards down that tree line. Had to been it. He'd have walked right by me. And then another time, about a week or so later, he was with a doe and he runs. My friend of mine was hunting him too, because everybody knew this deer was there.
Sure.
Darren was running late and he bumped him, and the doe, and they run right towards me, get about 40 yards. The doe peels off, runs right in that corner where I was just at the week before. He comes and stops out there, and then runs and stops in that corner right underneath that tree stand and just stares and looks at Darren walking. And I'm about ready to
kill Darren.
Kill myself and Darren, right? But the deer he was only at max 5.5. I think he was only 4.5 years old at 264.
Jeez.
The year before he was 190s with a drop tine. And that deer was all over the internet. And this is just a couple of years ago. It was a Reconyx set of pictures. We had a North American whitetail. Stan said one of the best series of trail cam pictures I've ever seen of this deer. And it's like he was posing in front of the scrape, right? And I still see it on the internet once in a while. Oh, my cousin had this deer in his backyard, blah, blah, blah. And it's my picture.
The deer's dead.
Yeah, and before I post to say, hey, this is the picture I took, guys. It's deer's 2008.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
So how'd he die?
Found him dead in the CRP. Some bird hunters did. I think somebody poached him from the road, whatever. But it was a sad, sad deal. Typical frame, probably 190s frame with 60, 70 inches of 4 drops.
Oh, 4?
Yeah.
Like Medusa.
It was crazy. I got a picture of him on my phone. I'll show you when we're done. But that's the thing that sticks out the most, just because he's just...
That's once in a lifetime.
Super giant, right?
It's once in several lifetimes.
Yeah, I'll never see another deer like that. So they're all small compared to him.
Yeah. That's incredible. So you mentioned Stan, you're referring to Stan Potts. So one of the cool things, I think, that you actually are on a lease with Stan Potts and Donnie Vincent. And you got a lot of good stories about those guys. Oh, yeah. Stan is, he's Stan, and he's just as animated in real life as he is, on TV, and everybody says, oh, it's not an act. He really is like that. Yeah. And he gets so pissed off and cussing. And I mean, it's hilarious every time he tells a story. He gets talking so much, he just runs out of breath. He can't even finish because he's just so into it, right? And it's hilarious. And, and Donnie Vincent's Donnie. He's been a good friend for 20 years as well.
back at the Grigsby, which is by Petersburg, where I'm from. And that's how I met him and Severson and Chris Caliendo and all these guys that, kind of stayed in touch. And, so Donnie's great. He went from, had a little internet business or a app business. Actually, he started an app.
Yeah.
Ringtone.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, him and his wife. So, then he got into filming and making these creative films that are just incredible now. And I always, Donnie, like one time, I'm kind of fibbing on myself here, or telling on myself, but DeerCast, after you kill a deer, we try to get a little quick blurb on.
Yeah, in the journal.
In the journal.
Yeah.
I said, Donnie, you know what happened here? Write me something. So he sat down there and he typed me up something. It's like, he can tell a story like nobody else, And I always say, Donnie, tell me how you went to the bathroom today. It was a sunny day and the crisp air, and I pulled my pants down. I mean, it's just hilarious, right?
That was probably the best written journal entry we've ever had.
Probably. You didn't even know, and it wasn't from me.
Good to know. I'll have to go back and look that one up. Stan has both of those guys. Mark and Terry love both of them. We've known them for a long time. Stan's one of their favorite people in the industry. Of course, he did a little work with us at Drury Outdoors way back in the 90s, and was, I think, instrumental in a lot of the times that we were over in Pike County, Illinois, and kind of that area. Stan was pretty instrumental in a lot of that. But the stories they have about Stan are priceless. And of course, Terry, he always imitates. He's got a knack for imitating people's voices and delivery, and he'll get to doing a Stan impression, and it's dead on too. It's hilarious.
And he was telling stories about your dad and brother because he was telling me the other day they got in a fight, and this is a long time ago.
Yeah.
Right? And he said just all the stories of being in a tree together and getting mad at each other.
That's why they don't hunt together.
That's right. They're both all pretty big personalities, right? They're going to want to do it their way. So it's fun to hear the stories. But one of Stan's favorite stories, and I've heard him tell it, 20, 30 times, but it's about an elk hunt in Colorado. And I don't know if you've heard it or not, but
I don't think so.
He's on this elk hunt, and it's the last day, and they're climbing up the mountain. Pat Reeve is filming him at the time.
Way back when, North American whitetail days.
Yep. And Pat was filming, and I can't remember the outfitter's name, probably best I don't tell, but they get up there, and they get on this bull, and it's getting late. I mean, it's right at camera light. Stan says, this bull comes in, pulls back, lets it go, and he says, man, I just dropped it right in there. He said it looked perfect. Elk runs off. But it's late, so they decided to come back the next morning. They found some blood, right?
Yeah.
So they come back the next morning. They kind of lose blood, but they're all up on the mountain looking for it. And Pat Reeve says, found him. So and Stan's like, yes. So he's trucking up the hill, right? And Pat's up there, and Pat's got the camera, and it's on his shoulder, and he runs up there and looks down, and Stan's like, there's a cow elk laying on the ground.
Oh, boy.
And he said, what the is this? And Pat says, it's your elk. And he goes, that's not my fucking elk. And Stan looks down there, and he says, my fletching is sticking out the butthole of that elk this far. He said, I perfectly 10-ringed her right in the brown eye. And he said,
so did he miss the one he was?
He said, this isn't, and he couldn't believe it, right?
Yeah.
Perfectly right Texas heart shot.
Yeah.
And so when they got back that day, and then the outfitter comes up and says, Stan's all pissed off, he's cussing. And the outfitter says, I don't know what you're so upset about. Any elk with a bow is a great elk. And Stan says, you gotta be shitting me, right? So I go back and look at the footage, and they got it on the TV. And sure as enough, he says, there's that bull sitting there. And then right behind us, there's this elk like this.
Looking back.
She's got her head spun around like this.
Yeah.
And he says, and just went right over her top.
So he missed the bull, And he hit the cow
right in the
pooper.
right dead stance as you couldn't. A surgeon couldn't have placed it any better.
Right there.
That's right. Right there.
So I can only imagine which Outfitter's right. Okay. He's right. It's not easy to archery kill one of these elk, but
yeah, it was,
there's a big but there.
Yeah. Stan was
not too happy. Huh?
No, for him to tell that story. And then he says, and then he looks at Pat, he goes, "I'm surprised you're filming all this." And Pat goes,
"Hey, with the camera." Yep. He motions up and down with the camera.
Nod with the camera. Yeah. That was funny.
That's pretty funny. Yeah. I'm surprised he was talking, the story he's referencing with Mark and Terry. We were just at a Conservation Federation of Missouri, a banquet here at Lake of the Ozarks, maybe 2 weeks ago or so, 3 weeks ago. And they were the keynote speakers for the banquet. And I've heard the story a bunch, but I've heard Terry has told it a little bit, but they've never really told it publicly like that. And they got up there and they told that story. The crowd was rolling. And basically the gist of it is they were in separate trees. Terry's hunting this day. They always switch back and forth. Right. Camera guy and hunter. And this was Terry's day to be the hunter. And neither one of them liked to be told what to do. And Mark was filming. Mark was looking away from Terry. The way they tell, a couple big deer, maybe in the 160s, 170s, big deer. And it's during the rut and they're in the timber and there's chasing going on. I think they were in Illinois, actually.
I think, yeah.
And so they're in separate trees and Mark is motioning behind his back for Terry to rattle. And he's kind of doing the Pee Wee Herman, but behind his back, and telling him to rattle. But he's never looking at Terry, so he doesn't know what Terry's doing. And again, they're in separate trees. Mark's filming. And finally, Terry screams at him some obscenities about, don't tell him what to do kind of thing. And he's like, "I'm going to come over there and kick your, butt." And so he climbed down his tree. And you want to hear rattling? And then he rattled real hard and just did a real aggressive sequence because he was pissed. And then he's like, "I'm going to come over there and kick your ass." So he climbs down the tree. He walks over there. And Mark said, depending on who tells the story, somebody was going to get their butt kicked. Right. Well, Mark tells it like I wasn't about to let him get into my stand, so I was going to kick him while he was coming up the tree. Well, Mark looks back after all that calling. He looks back up, I guess, in the timber, and that buck that he was wanting him to call to starts running back towards them. And he's like, "Buck, Terry, buck." So Terry got back up into his tree real quick, and it ended up, he ran past them. They didn't get a shot, but they say that deer saved somebody's life. And depending on who tells the story is whose life was going to be saved that day.
Yeah, absolutely. That's just the fun stories of deer hunting, right? We all have them. Yeah. And stuff that goes down and you'll never forget them. That's one of them that they'll never forget, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And it's fun because they occasionally, Terry will get a tag, an Iowa tag, or maybe grandma's got a tag up there. So they'll go up and hunt together, but it's really rare. They don't get a hunt very often together anymore. And we're all spread out in separate camps. Really hardly any of us get a hunt together anymore. So
right.
It's those, you look back at those times as some of the fun stuff.
Oh yeah. It's special. And, Coop and I are just getting to that point, right? He's out of school now and he's living out of house, getting engaged and starting his life, but he's going to be close. So I'm excited about being able to do that.
And he's been on, Critical Mass quite a bit here lately. And he's done a great job. He's doing a lot of self-filming as well. He films you obviously, but he's done a lot of self-filming and he's almost becoming another character on the show for us.
Yeah. He's done a great job and he loves the camera. He loves that part of it, and kind of going back to the self-filming and, just so it's not hard enough, I'm using a DSLR, not a camcorder. So
that's extremely hard.
So we're doing it that way as well. So it's even a little more difficult.
When it's right, it's unbelievable. It looks great. But when it's wrong, a lot of things the focus is the issue, really. The zoom and the focus are the two issues. There's not a ton of zoom there, and it could easily get bumped out of focus or out of focus in general.
Yeah, and that actually was on Coop's one hunt this year whenever he was filming Kevin. And that deer came in and they switched roles, right?
Yeah.
So it was just a little out of focus on that one. But, it just looks so good. And why I do it and the reason, and, I would tell people that the last 15 minutes and the first 15 minutes I have a big distinct advantage because I can film up to the last minute of light and be just fine.
Yeah. The DSLR is way better than the cameras. Like we're using those bigger, you know, kind of a shoulder camera, if you will. And they just don't, the last 5-10 minutes, if it's cloudy, you're screwed. It could be the last 15 or 20. You're just kind of out of light.
Right. And I'm not, I can go all the way up. Yeah. So that's the biggest reason why I use it.
Yeah. That was always the beauty with like Scott, who's no longer with us. he would always, he's alive. He's working with his dad these days, but he would be able to switch over to the DSLR. He always had it packed with him. And so it was nice because he bought us a lot of time, that, you know, traditionally your camera guys can't if they don't know how to run that DSLR.
Right. And I've actually used it when I couldn't see what's in the field at night. Like last light, I've looked through my camera to be able to tell what deer's out there, and you know when I want to get out, what's out there. I mean, I literally can, I take it up to ISO to 400,000 and stuff, and
it's pretty amazing, honestly.
I got the Sony, 2.8 lens on there, and the 70x200 one that I literally can feel like I can see in the dark.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because, with those Leopolds, you'll get the last 15, first 15, it does really good on. But then once you're just out of that light, it's amazing what these like mirrorless cameras can pull in and how it's almost like AI creating.
It's incredible. Light. It really is. And that's self-filming, and that's why I went to that. It's because I wanted those last.
It's when most of the big bucks move.
Especially early season, right? You're talking October and stuff like that. And late season, that's like kind of when it is. And, we can go back and look at your footage over the years, and there's a lot of grainy footage because of that, right?
Oh, yeah.
Not that it matters. You still kill the deer and all that's great. But, the better the footage can be for me, I love that.
And, for sure.
So.
You guys, so anything you're excited about going? Do you do much turkey hunting?
I do some, yeah.
Yeah. I know you've been extremely busy in your professional life, so it's hard to get out there. Is there anything you're looking forward to this coming deer season where it's like, I think, whether it's a lease or a farm or a new farm that you guys are excited about something that's coming up?
Yeah, we as you know, Kevin, and we have a big farm up in Missouri, not far from where you're at.
Yeah.
And we were just up there this weekend with the skid steer and the mulcher, making new food plots. The farm's been hunted, probably over hunted, but it's, 600 acres of timber. And so we feel like there were a couple of really good deer on it. I'm just really excited about what's going to happen there with implementing the things that we do as deer managers, right? Getting the biologic out there, getting the green out there, leaving crops, setting the place up for deer, to maximize their potential. And I think, in a couple of years, that place is going to be phenomenal. And so I'm really looking forward to what that does. And then at home, it's, I do turkey hunt, but I'm one of those guys that I love it when it's right, hate it when it's not.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Be brutal when it's not.
like Rhett, he's an unbelievable turkey hunter. He'll stay out there till in Illinois it stops at 1:00, right? He'll sit there in the same spot until 1:00.
That's tough to.
I'm a
run and gun.
If they're not gobbling at me, then I'm going back to work, right? I mean, I love it when it's right, but I just pick my battles in time. So, in the spring, for me, it's about really, I'm a big wildlife manager type person as far as equipment and tractors and putting in food plots and water holes and doing all those things that I really enjoy doing. I love being outside, and, I have like 25 acres of food plots at my house. We got another 25 at the lease. So pretty busy.
Yeah. That's a lot of work.
Putting those in, right? I don't have a Perry to do my,
and dirty work.
Yeah. So but I love it, so that's really the springtime is what I focus on, and is really getting things ready for the fall.
So, okay. So speaking of that, let's dive into it a little bit further. So exactly what prioritize that list? What's the first thing you address in the spring, getting prepared for that? Like, okay, do you frost seed? Do you do a lot of clover, or what's the main food plot that you're working with?
Well, I've always been a big proponent of diversity, right? So first thing I do though is, I just got done doing all the frost seeding in the clover, right? And anybody out there watching is you'll save yourself a ton of work. Just go out there in February, March and frost seed that, and Mother Nature does the rest for you, right?
Yeah.
You got any bare dirt, throw clover seed on it, it's going to come up, you
Yeah.
know, most of the time.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what I focus on first is all those, you know, perennial green fields like that. And then I try to then focus on, okay, what am I planting next, whether corn or beans? So I do working on those things and spraying, or, you know, I'm really trying to get away from, we talked a little bit about this offline about kind of more regenerative type of ag practices, less chemicals, more cover crop, you know, trying to use less glyphosate and all those things that we want organic meat. We want those things clean that we eat, but yet if we're pumping a bunch of chemicals in there, then how much different is it than, you know, processed food? I mean, it's different, don't get me wrong, but, you know,
Still getting into their system.
Right. It's still in there. They're still eating it. So, you know, I'm leaning towards, you know, doing more of these cover crops. So I really think that's the future of ag and, you know, what we do as deer hunters. I think we can start using less chemicals and more regenerative type cover crop things.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm going. But, you know, again, I get my corn and beans laid out, what I'm going to do there. And then with a plan on, you know, then the green fields are, you know, my fall plot's going to go here and here. And I think it changes based on, you know, what deer you had last year, right? Where does this big deer that's going to be on target, where does he live?
Yeah.
Right. So like this year we went and I met with the landowner that we have this long-term lease with. And, you know, we established several more areas that they're getting hammered anyway by the deer.
Yeah.
So it doesn't help the
crops,
their APH, right? It actually hurts their yield average. So we're taking those out of production, calling wildlife acres. So it's going to be big. It's right where I killed uppercut this year. We're going to have an area there. And there's a deer called Super 2 that, you know, he's 4-year-old. He was 180s last year. We let him go. So I think I got a good chance of killing that deer right there in that new spot we're putting in. So
especially when you have a deer like that, you know, it's kind of all in, you know, it's like, how can I adjust this time of year? It's like, how can I adjust my entire setup to capitalize off of the few sightings or the trail camera imagery that we have of this deer, what we know of this deer. I mean, Mark and Terry, that's what they've always been great at. It's like, all right, focusing on him, we're devising a plan this time of year specifically for this animal.
Right.
And it doesn't always work out, but it's amazing to me how often it really can.
Yeah, and I think everybody's learned a lot. I know I have through the years of, you know, Mark and Terry, their job really has been what we're doing here, right? Deer hunting and DeerCast, to create all the stuff and all the content that people watched. And if people would just listen and learn, you know, they'll learn a lot. And, you know, I think that one thing that I started to really focus on was what Mark does a lot is like, the pictures I get this year really aren't for this year, it's for next year.
Yeah.
That's really, I think, important to, you know, find that deer's habits, and they have a tendency to be year to year, do the same things, you know, not always, but in general,
yeah.
If he's there in the third week of October, he's probably going to be there the third week of October next year, right?
Yeah.
Unless something drastic changes, but I would say 89% of the time that's going to be the case.
Yeah.
So that's what I really like to do is focus on. For next year, I'm looking at my chart and I was, okay, this deer is here. This is the deer I want to go after, and, you know, kind of devise a plan around that.
So on the piece of Missouri that's relatively new for you guys, you talked about going in with a mulcher and all that. Like what's you're creating food plots or creating kind of paths to and from stands, or
both?
Yeah.
We wanted to be able to access the farm from a different way. So we went probably a half a mile through the edge of the timber, but it's right on the fence line, right on the edge, right? So without having to go through the neighbors, we created a trail right down the edge of the fence. So if we take electric bike or, you know, something, we can get through there if we need to, right? Yeah. But, you know, typically we're going to try to stay out of there. But what we've done is there's some CRP fields that had grown up, and Tom Ware started some of the work because actually Tom was going to buy this. Is a long story there. But anyway, we're in there cutting some of this bush honeysuckle and autumn olive, all the invasive stuff out, and creating, you know, a couple acre plots right there that we're going to have then just great access to. We got great cover on these ridge tops, sneak in there, jump in a blind and have that food plot. The kind of the classic, what Mark and Terry do, right?
Yeah.
That everybody's learned a lot off of.
Yeah, for sure. That's the next level stuff. Like, it's one thing I'm still very new into this. So it's like, all right, creating the food plots are one thing and devising a plan for that strategy, but actually going in and carving something out, that's a whole different level of, you really, to get a strategy in place. Like, I know they're bedded over here. This is typically how they move, and my access would be the best over in this section. And like devising a plan in that regard, that's kind of the next level of being a gamekeeper and deer kind of management.
I think you have to try to manipulate their behavior to your benefit, right? For ingress and egress, really, this is the key. I think to kill, not just a deer hunt, but to deer hunt a deer, right?
Yeah,
that's I think what most people. And hey, if you're just out there you don't get to hunt like we do as much, and you're out there, just go out and have fun and do it. But if you want to go to the next level of management or targeting, then this is the stuff you have to do. You know? And I think people, what I hear all the time, and it frustrates me, is like, oh, they got the money and they got the land and they're lucky. And it isn't about luck. It's about, they put in 100 times more effort than you do.
Yeah.
If you're hunting 3 Saturdays in November, we're hunting 30 days in November, right?
Yeah.
So, for every, I'm out there 10 to 1, 20 to 1, what you are. That's why I'm successful. Not that I'm a much better hunter. I'm just put a lot more effort at it.
Yeah. And it takes a lot of effort for that caliber or quality of deer. It just takes a different level.
Yeah.
You could look, there's the youth season where the little girl in her first hunt kills a deer. That happens all the time. Hey, you could always say, oh, my grandpa smoked a Marlboro and wore flannel. He killed, giants. That stuff happens, certainly. But also some of that is based on the timing of when they're hunting. It can happen.
Right.
But when you're talking about what you're talking about, the archery hunting and the specific, like honing in on one specific deer, it typically requires a lot more effort to up the odds in your favor.
Sure. I mean, I hunted hours and I killed 1 deer this year, right? I passed up a lot of deer people might shoot, right? But that's, I've just always, I'm not going to shoot a deer just to shoot one, you know? And that's who I am. And, I got specific deer in mind. And, if I shoot a 140 or 150, I think, well, then I can't be a 180, right? So not that that's for me, and everybody's different, but for me, that's what I want to do. I want a big mature deer. That's my goal, right? And I'll go 30 days in a row without shooting nothing and spend 6 hours a day. And I'm on my phone doing work and texting emails and getting blown at because I was working and not paying attention. But but we still have to work, right? It's like, we've done it, right? It's like you're sitting there on your phone and you look down, there's a deer right next to you. But
the worst.
Yeah.
Well, it's all good. It's all good stuff. And I think that it's in line with what we try to talk about on the podcast. We always say, like, we're not the experts, but we like to bring people in that have a little, the knowledge base. And certainly I think you've made your case over, the history of how many big deer you've killed over, the last 20 years. Like, you guys have killed some really good quality caliber deer over that time span.
Yeah. I mean, we've, on our lease with Stan and myself, and, I think we have 13 booners or something. I don't know. Nothing's been 200 yet, but, I've killed 2 or 3 in the 80s and 70s, and Stan has. And so we got a great piece of property, don't get me wrong, right? But it was outfitted and overhunted, and we put our management in place. Actually, this year we're going to put about 15 acres of switchgrass in.
Nice.
So we're taking it. It just got logged. So, the capacity is going up there. And, one thing and this, I'm going to jump to a different subject here, but I grew up, deer hunting, but then when I bought this farm, it was a bottomland farm, all CRP, right?
Yeah.
Flat like this. And I think that what I've learned, and I was going to do something on a journal about it, never got it done, but I think there's some real subtleties about hunting river bottom farms that people don't, it's just a big open flat timber. And like when you have ridges and,
ways to funnel them, it's a
and
little
like,
different.
Okay, but there are subtle differences out there. And I think that's one thing that if you're hunting a river bottom, you need to look, it's very subtle, but they're there. And I learned that over time is, if there's a wet spot out there where it floods in the spring, and it recedes and it grows up, and wherever those trees meet those weeds, that edge is there. And if there's an old fence row through there, I mean, all those things you walk by and not paying attention, but they're edges within that the deer use. And it took me several years to figure it out, but we started killing big deer at my house once I learned what those differences are. And I think there's a lot of people hunt those river bottom farms, right? Because there's always trees there because it can't be developed, right?
Yeah.
But they're hard. It's hard to hunt, and it takes the time to learn about it. I think we could do a whole segment on just that type of environment that's different than, the hills where you got pinches and valleys and saddles and all those things that are subtle differences. And I think it's something that took me a long time to learn, but.
That's interesting because I know and this is different. You're in Illinois and what I'm about to say, these guys are down in Mississippi, but the guys from Mossy Oak talk about that a lot because there's a little swampy, there's a little more swampy, but it's that kind of same type of terrain, right? Where it's flat and they can go anywhere and everywhere. And they often talk, when we're catching up and on calls and stuff about how difficult it can be down there to pattern a deer to one certain, area. Cause they just are spread out a little bit differently, right?
Yeah, and I planted 110,000 trees on my property.
Crap.
Twice, because the first time it flooded and I had to replant them all. That's 31 days on a tree planter.
And aren't you
doing like this?
Yeah, I was gonna say, aren't you literally putting each one in?
31 days.
Yeah.
Bought the farm and probably couldn't afford it, but it was during the crep time and they were doing payments, and so. But I learned a lot, and it's kind of my background and wanting to do conservation and stuff. But that tree planting, when they stand up out there, like you said, he can go 360.
Yeah.
Whichever way he wants to go, he can do that.
Yeah.
And now I got all these oaks that are 22 years old now. They're starting to drop acorns. So now they're just like. You just lay underneath an acorn tree. And
I was going to say that makes it even more difficult, doesn't it?
Right. So, you got to create things that they can't get there, right? Like biologic stuff, the brassicas, all those things that they don't get. And that's, why you have to, but it's unbelievable habitat and cover for them to hide in, right? And live in security wise. So, I've learned a lot over the years, and it's just, like everybody, the older you get, you learn stuff and you keep learning all the time. I'm sure Mark and Terry do as well. So you're never going to figure these animals out, but you can try.
I was going to say, you could try to stack the odds in your favor, right? And
absolutely.
That's what the great ones are doing.
I think, and what Drury's have done is, educated more people about deer hunting than anybody. I really think that their videos from way back, and it's always been about educating people on how to get better at deer hunting. I've heard MRI being used several times in people's conversations. I think, you guys coined that. And
I think they certainly have helped change the lexicon of what people phases. You never heard people talking about phases or the phases of the season or really to this degree, or like you said, the MRI, which I think they got from Grant Woods actually. And it's you just pick up those little things, and that they're from the outset. Education, whether it was the Turkey VHS titles way back in the day, Sound of Spring and King of the Spring and all those things, it was always about how to help, the consumer at home learn something from our mistakes and from our success.
Right. Absolutely. And you guys have done a fantastic job.
Yeah. That's their lane, and we've stayed in it. They always say we're not good looking, we're not funny, so we better teach them something.
We better be good at something, right?
That's right. Yeah. Well, perfect. I'm going to jump into a couple of things. So I'm sure you're a huge fan of this podcast, but in case you don't know, the next segments we're getting into. So we got a question of the day, and then we got a wildlife word of the day that we typically do. So we're going to jump into the question of the day first. So the question of the day is brought to you by Tenzing Go Further, Hunt Longer, and it's from Tyler Brown over in the Rack Pack over on Facebook. It says, do you have any thoughts on spring food plots, especially on medium to small wood lots? Is clover the go-to move? So Mark, what do you think?
I think a perennial clover alfalfa is, a hard to beat recipe, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I just think you fertilize it, keep the nutrient value where it is. I think for the average person that doesn't have maybe the time, the equipment, frost seeding clover is probably the best.
Yeah, we've done that on a spot out in Marthasville in one of our leases, and we carved out a little kind of a hidey hole food plot, and we planted last bite in it the year before. Didn't really come up overly great, with the shade and all that stuff, but we frost seeded then, and for the next year, which was this last fall, and the clover, it was great. It was awesome, and Scott just frost seeded a couple weeks ago. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think 100% that's the go-to.
The pH levels you got to work on a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you get in timber, it's typically it gets into 5s, right?
Yeah,
and you got to get that up. And I think there's a lot of the lime is one thing, but there's a lot of liquid products now, chelated lime, and there's things that you can spray in your backpack sprayer even to really help get that pH at the surface higher. So, instant fixes that people need to really look at. And there's a lot of new micronutrient products coming online that I think would really help the average person on those food plots.
Yeah. So, clover is a great go-to move. And like you said, relatively easy to maintain it after that.
Absolutely.
So, I know like in the fall, once the fall hit and all the leaves, fell, we went in and we had to kind of rake off the leaves from the food plot because they were kind of covering up. But the deer, they don't care. They dig past all that and they still eat it. But just in general for the, the sun contact and then once we went to frost seed, we needed to get all that off of there.
I just use a big backpack leaf blower.
Yeah, I just didn't have one. That would have been, that works smarter, not harder.
I'm a little older than you, so
That's right. Okay, so next thing, we get the wildlife word. So this is typically Tim's deal usually. So he'll create some sort of wildlife word. He'll ask me a question, and then he'll watch me struggle through the answer. Like it goes back to high school and college, like me trying to figure out what this answer was. So what we did this week, producer Matt, gave me the question gave me the question and gave me options, A, B, C, and D options, but he didn't give me the answer. So we're both going to struggle.
Okay, all right.
I'll struggle, certainly. You might know this. So today's wildlife word is brought to you by Hunter Specialties. All right. So the question is, what is Bergman's rule? Bergman's rule. A, the natural law that prevents Tim from successful turkey hunting. We should add and deer hunting. B, an ecological trend where animals within a species, mainly mammals and birds, are larger than the further from the equator. The further from the equator. Yep. Okay. C, an ecogeographical rules broadly stating that animals adapted to cold climates have shorter and thicker limbs and bodily appendages than animals adapted to warm climates. That was a mouthful. D, a tyrannical British king you've never heard of.
I'm going to go with B.
An ecological trend where animals within a species, mainly mammals and birds, are larger the further from the equator. Bergman's rule. I'm going to go with B as well. Producer Matt, what do we have today?
You are both right.
Well,
it is B.
Of course we were right.
Ecological trend where animals within a species are larger the further from the equator.
All right, B it is. Hey.
There we go, man.
Well, once you said B, I pretty much decided I was going B. Tim's in there just judging us as we speak. Okay, so last but certainly not least, we have the Rack Pack. I don't know if you're in the Rack Pack or not. It's a Facebook group. It's a private Facebook group. It's for like listeners of the show.
Right.
And it's actually pretty cool. It's a good group to be. It's maybe a little under 3,000 people in it.
I think I've seen... If I'm not on it, I'm going to do it right when we leave.
Sure. Well, that's what we usually get from our guests. If I'm not in there, I'm going to get in there. Okay.
I think I've seen it on my feed, though.
Yeah. So every week we list out some names of new members. Every week I butcher them. Every week they throw a fake name in there, and I got to sniff that out. So this week, the new Rack Pack members, we got Stryker O'Boyle. We got Seth Troyer. We got Hugh Mungus. I think it's Hugh Mungus. We got Rod Pfizer and Levi Leisure. Could have been Stryker or Boyle. Stryker is a pretty cool name. We are turkey season.
Yeah, that's right.
So it could have been Stryker, but I think I'm going to go with Hugh Mungus. Yeah. You guys got to work harder than that. Come on.
I mean, that's not too difficult.
No, usually they're a little tougher than that.
For us.
All right. Well, any parting shots for us?
Well, I think Tim might be out of job.
We're going to just have you drive the 2.5 hours every time I shoot a podcast. No problem.
I really enjoyed it though, Matt. Thank you very much. I know we've been talking outside of this in, last month or so. It's been good to talk about other stuff.
That's right.
Deer hunting and
that's right.
Business stuff. So it's been fun and look forward to it.
That's right. We ran into each other at Chacho and had a great dinner. Awesome night. Donnie was there. Your friend Kevin. Like it was a great night.
Yeah, it was fun. We had a good time that night.
Ate way too much crab legs.
They were the best. Man.
It was the best.
They are the best.
Yeah,
for sure.
So enjoyed it thoroughly. But appreciate you coming in. Appreciate you driving all the way over. Good luck this season.
Yeah, looking forward to another year of Critical Mass and Drury Outdoors and what these guys do. I really can't say it enough. What they do for the hunting industry, introducing people to hunting. The Make-A-Wish,
the Catch a Dream side.
Catch a Dream. Yeah. All those things are just to me way more important than the hunting itself and the deer that we kill. It's really about all that Terry, Mark, and Matt and the team do here. So I want to thank them and everybody involved and all the guys working behind the scenes here. Couldn't do it without them. So, and all the sponsors. So thank you guys so much.
Well, we appreciate it. Appreciate your time. And hopefully we'll have you back on after you kill that big 5-year-old this year that you planted your food plots.
That's right. We got a couple other ones though. So there are a couple on the list.
Look forward to a strategy session after the fact.
That's right.
All right.
Matt. Thanks, bud.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Until next time. Peace out.
DeerCast is now supercharged with maps. Get ahead of your game with killer new features like live Doppler radar, wind check out to 5 days, virtual rain gauges, GPS path tracking, and more. Plus, get our 14-day revolutionary DeerCast prediction and access to DeerCast Track. Prep, predict, and pursue with DeerCast.
We're adding new videos every week, so make sure to click that subscribe button and check out all of our amazing content. This episode of DoD TV is brought to you by DeerCast. Prep, predict, and pursue your target buck.